today? Hopefully pretty good. Thank you everyone for joining us on your Wednesday afternoon for our conversation of Beyond 2D, the rise of immersive commerce. My name is Joshua Ness and I am a senior manager at Verizon 5G Labs in New York City. We're excited to host this discussion as part of our 5G Labs virtual event series. We used to do a lot of our events in person live in our lab in New York and at our other lab locations around the world, but we have gone virtual these days. For those of you who aren't familiar with Verizon 5G Labs, we work with startups, academia, and enterprise teams to build a 5G powered world using the practical application of emerging technologies. And part of that mission includes having conversations like this that address emerging technology as well as barriers to digital inclusion to create opportunities for communities to come together and thrive and grow. And if you're interested in learning more about our work, visit us at verizon5glabs.com. We also want to thank Ali for partnering with us to help make this happen. Ali is a community agency that unites rich and diverse communities around the country with corporate partners to provide resources and be a catalyst to drive positive change in technology and in the broader world. Without further ado, I want to turn it over to our incredible panelists who are joining us today. Hopefully, they are going to be enjoying themselves as well. We have first Srinivas from Verizon Media. Srinivas, do you want to give us a quick intro?
Hey, Josh, thanks for that. Folks, I'm part of the Verizon Media team, part of the Verizon family, and I run commerce engineering for Verizon Media. Last year, our CEO, Guru Gaurappan, talked about Verizon Media's aspirations in commerce. And in my role, I'm helping bring this vision to life. We're developing many more ways for audiences across all of our properties of brands to shop both on and off our sites, and also providing brands more ways to connect with these audiences. Not only has this come from increased amounts of commerce-focused content, but also by changing the way content looks and feels as people shop more through video, immersive commerce that we're going to talk about a little bit here, and also finding new ways to transact, such as shopping for groceries on partners like Walmart directly from their inboxes, like the Yahoo mailbox. Excited to be here.
Very cool. We're excited to have you. Also joining us is Neha from Obsess. Neha, what are you working on these days?
Thanks, Josh. Hi, everyone. My name is Neha Singh. I'm the founder and CEO of Obsess. We are an experiential e-commerce platform. So we essentially enable brands to create really visual, immersive, branded virtual stores on their websites. We are working with a large number of fashion, beauty retailers, also with some big box retailers. And really our mission is to reinvent the online shopping interface from something that hasn't really seen a lot of innovation for the last many years. And happy to be here.
Yeah, I think we're going to talk a lot about that today. Finally, Neil Redding from Redding Futures. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Josh. Thanks for having me here. It's great to be here. So as you mentioned, I founded and CEO, run a boutique consultancy called Redding Futures, where we help brands and businesses engage powerfully with the near future, as we describe it, which pre-COVID, we talked about as the next 3 to 5 years. I think now the near future is feeling kind of nearer than it used to. But the good news is that I think everything we're talking about kind of broadly is about digital physical convergence, right? And we're going to get into a lot of that as it shows up in the kind of subdomain of that convergence that we're calling immersive commerce today. Also, I co-created and co-edit a publication on Medium called Near Future of Retail. It's at nearfutureofretail.com. And so a lot of the work that I do and that we see, my co-editor and I, Tony Parisi, that we see happening in the, again, digital physical convergence as it shows up in retail, we cover on that publication, again, nearfutureofretail.com. So excited to get into it with all of you.
Yeah, it's going to be a great talk. Neil, just a quick shout out to our friends at Augmented World Expo for putting us together for this talk. So we've done some really great work with them and super excited that we're connected on that. Awesome. As we're diving into what immersive commerce means and where it's going, wanted to give a quick primer on something that's going to come up in this conversation. We're going to talk about how immersive commerce is has been evolving, is going to continue to evolve. And one of the reasons why we're at 5G Labs are interested in this is because we look specifically at how 5G is impacting emerging technologies across industries. And for those who don't know, 5G represents the next generation of wireless connectivity. It's more than just a faster version of 4G. It really is a reimagining of the network from the ground up, with much faster broadband, much lower latency, as well as the ability to empower a lot of supporting technologies, things like edge compute, as well as industrial IoT, or the Internet of Things. And so we're talking about allowing hundreds of thousands or millions of devices in very small geographic areas to be able to have access to very high broadband with ultra low latency. And that is going to unlock a whole new range of experiences, both for consumers and for businesses. And so as we're having this conversation, for everyone in the audience, I want you to be thinking about what does it mean when 5G is ubiquitous, because it's already here, and it's across the country in one form or another, and it's only going to improve over time, both in the quality and the speed, and the reliability, as well as in its ubiquitousness across the country. And so as you're listening to this conversation, I want you to be thinking about, what does 5G mean for you in the context of what you're working on as we're having this conversation about this particular topic. So as we're diving into it, for anyone unfamiliar with the term immersive commerce, I want to elaborate on some background about it. So I'm curious to everyone here who's joining me today, how do you define immersive commerce? What is the value? What does that evolution looked like? Neha, I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so as I was kind of mentioning in my intro, what we see as immersive commerce is really the next generation of the online shopping interface. If you think about today, almost all e-commerce sites, once you get past the homepage, it's basically a grid of thumbnails on a white background, right? And especially as you go to your mobile device, that kind of interface across different brands and across different sites looks exactly identical. The only thing that's different is like a font and a color change, right? And that's not sufficient differentiation for brands as a majority of their business moves online. As that's really the same interface that was created by Amazon 25 years ago to sell books. And then from books, it got used by every brand and for every category, right? So immersive, the rise of immersive and VR, AR, and the capabilities possible today on a mobile device, and what will be possible with 5G, all of these are enabling us to create a much more visual, much more contextual online shopping experience that hasn't been possible until now because of hardware limitations and network limitations. So for us specifically, what immersive commerce means is we create 3D 360 virtual stores, and these virtual stores can really look like anything. They don't have to look like stores. They're experiences that the brand can really use to manifest their vision, their inspiration for a particular season into the moment that the customer is actually shopping for it. So I have a quick video here that can kind of explain much more visually what I'm trying to say, and it will just show a few of our recent virtual stores that we have created for brands for the holidays. And basically this first one, I'll let it play through. Yeah.
Darlings, this is so exciting. Welcome to my virtual gift shop in this amazing, beautiful gifting wonderland. Here we are together in virtual reality.
Yeah, so that's just to give you an idea of kind of what we are talking about in terms of immersive commerce. The quality of the video itself is lower, but the actual experience is a very high resolution. But essentially, it's giving it's giving brands a much more visual, discovery-driven format to their consumers to discover their products. And all of this for us is happening on the web, on mobile, without requiring an app download or requiring headsets. And that's a really important part of how, at this moment, this technology becomes ubiquitous to consumers.
That's very cool. I like that video. It sounds the way that my dining room looks. I'm digging it. And I have some things I want to follow up with in just a little bit around something you mentioned around hardware limitations, and I'm curious to know what you think in the next in our next topic about where hardware combined with advanced connectivity might unlock some even more significant aspects of what you're working on. Neil, moving on to you, like, how are you defining immersive commerce, and what has that evolution looked like in your world? I think.
I do, yeah, thanks, Josh. I do have a visual, but I will just say, I mean, I love everything you're showing, Neha. I think I've heard you speak elsewhere, and I think as you're alluding to here, this is all this technology and what it enables, both in terms of connectivity with 5G and also the sort of personal technology, which will eventually, I think, move on to our faces, right, and allow us to really feel like we're truly in the spaces that are being presented as simulations. And as you said, I mean, they don't need to, they can start with physical stores, because I think what we're doing now when we talk about immersive commerce is a lot of it is riffing on or an evolution that's grounded in the physical store, right? Because we're all familiar with that and we're using that kind of metaphor. But I think where we're headed is potentially much more expansive or even fantastical kinds of spaces that are not constrained by the cost and the physics, of physical spaces. So I wanted to show you one example that will just, I think, be a bit of a good conversation piece. And let me know if you can see. Can you see this as full screen? Does this work okay? Yeah, showing us full screen. So this is actually I'm going to pause this for 1 second while I'll just keep going. So this is for a client, a furniture client that I'm working on in collaboration with a startup called BitReal. And what this is doing is, this is on the web. This is for a client called Helman Chang. And I'm actually going to move so you can we'll zoom in here and you can see more of this on your screen. This is a real-time 3D rendered showroom. And so it's not an actual showroom. This is, Helman Chang is a high-end furniture retailer. And so this is grounded in and based on the sort of creative direction and merchandising approach that they apply to their showrooms. This is their actual furniture. It's all real-time 3D and lit like a space. And the way you navigate it is very similar to game mechanics, like first person if you're in Fortnite or some other kind of game like that. And so this is exploring kind of a hypothesis. And of course, this will show you that you can take furniture items that you find in the showroom and then bring them into your space in augmented reality. Most of you may have experience with this. But this is exploring the hypothesis that people may want to be in a simulation of a showroom that feels like being in a showroom, with the ability to walk around, have a little bit of freedom to do that. And because we've been missing this, right? I think a lot of immersive commerce, to my mind, is allowing us to be in spaces with each other, in these stores with physical products that we haven't been able to shop this way, thanks to COVID for a while. The other piece of this, sorry, I paused that in the wrong place. Let me see if I can pause it here. Is really the ability, like I was describing, to pull out items that you discover in a showroom, from the showroom into augmented reality, into your own space. And then this is a little bit of a frontier now, I think, but taking multiple products and starting to lay out your own room with photoreal 3D models of products that you discover in an immersive showroom. So this is another piece that we're looking at, and it's really a frontier, trying to make this work well, but we see this as where things are headed, like being able to be immersed in a space, project yourself into a space, be immersed in a simulation, but then also bring these 3D photoreal objects into your own space and lay them out. And so furniture is a great example of that. So hopefully that's a good, what I say, a good illustration to use as a grounding for some of the conversation here, Josh.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Are there any major retailers that are using that kind of technology right now? Like, can I go to Wayfair and get an AR representation of what a piece of furniture might look like in my room?
You can, yes. I mean, so Wayfair, Amazon is also doing this quite well. Mobile augmented reality, sort of putting three-dimensional objects, furniture is kind of the easiest because it has such a sort of robust physicality, and it's relatively easy to create photoreal 3D models that you can put in your space, walk around, and have the experience. It's almost visceral of like being with that object. So yes, it's a long yes. Wayfair is doing it well, and I think there's, like I said, there's Amazon, there's other companies that are doing it to the point where I think we're approaching a point where that kind of browsing experience is expected. I think, you know, for physical objects like this, and I think for the coming few years, it's going to kind of be taking that as, again, as expected, as kind of baseline, and sort of what can we do from there. So I think what Obsess is doing, what BitReal is doing in terms of putting people in the store in a way that's immersive is kind of a next frontier. It's something that I think many of us are excited to explore that on top of the AR piece, you know.
Right. Yeah, and Srinivas, rounding it out with you, I know Verizon is exploring a lot of immersive commerce, but how are you defining immersive commerce, and how do you see that evolution that has happened from us in the telecoms industry and from the media side?
Yes, certainly. So I think Neha and Neil have hit upon some of this. Let me take a slightly another perspective on this, and that's the customer's perspective. So today, when you as a customer are browsing on the web or you go to a physical store, there are certain things you can do in each one of them, but there are very few places where you can do both of them, and both are required for you to actually meet your end need. So for example, if you go to a physical store and you look at a product and you want to do some kind of price comparison, or you want to look at products from two different stores, mix and match them, there's no real easy way to do that. And if you're on the web with the majority of the web still using technology, like Neha pointed out, that's 25 years old, it's really difficult to bring that virtual into the physical. With the evolution in technology, with first starting with LTE, with the increased speeds there, and now with 5G and MEC, or the mobile edge compute, with the edge compute piece of it, technology has reached a point where we can actually serve the customer needs a lot better. We can personalize it for the customer. We can actually allow them to interact with the products without having to be physically there. We can allow them to combine the physical with the virtual. So at least the way we look at immersive here is that combination of that physical and the virtual worlds to enable the customer to have a commerce-focused interaction and to be able to interact from that surface with minimal friction. The key thing here is focus on the customer need, push the technology in the background. The technology powers it, but it's not in their face.
And does that have any implication for advertising, for selling ad space on those kinds of properties?
Absolutely. So Verizon announced Verizon Media Interactive Platform earlier this year. And that is one where we have the capability of enabling 3D enabled ads, and the things that Neil was talking about, some of the things that like Neil showed with some of the with a game engine and using photoreal images to be able to allow the people experience the space. Those are things that we have available on the platform. In fact, the 5G labs, we did one very similar for a virtual visit to a 5G lab in the Playa office that used the game engine to allow people to interact and actually bring in video conferences. And on the ad unit side, we'll go into our ad showcase later on here, where we can talk about some of the things that we have done. Furniture is one we have done. Apparel, footwear, beauty are areas where some of these are available both as ad units and commerce units.
Very cool. Neil, going back to your to what you were sharing from a consultancy perspective, where are we seeing, or where are you seeing the biggest adoptions to this technology, whether it's across industries like furniture or beauty or shoes or things like that? And then we had a question come in from Justin around in the audience around, are these experiences able to be shared? And are we seeing a market for multiple people in different geographic locations to be able to collaborate on that same web-based showroom, and for a user to get other opinions on whether or not, let's say, a piece of furniture works in a room?
Yeah, those are great questions. So thank you for that. I'll take them in reverse order. I mean, the piece about social shopping, you might call it, or co-browsing, is a super interesting one. And I'll say that without announcing anything that I'm aware of that I shouldn't announce. I mean, it is coming, right? And actually, I don't know. It's possible Obsess allows this as well, but I think I think this is also part of the frontier of where things are headed the next few years, being able to go shopping with your friends. I mean, to me, it's part of what we've become very conscious of missing, right? Thanks to COVID and thanks to the danger of being in physical spaces like stores, where there's just the fact that they've been inaccessible to us, right, during COVID. But sort of being in those spaces, being with people that we love, having that sensory experience of the product, and I think, I'll pivot to your first question as well, sort of what kinds of products or what kinds of industries, because it's related to this. I think, there are certain kinds of products that I think are much more, where it's more compelling to go shopping with friends, right? I think the kinds of product sets that Obsess is showing, I mean, it's just my opinion, but the apparel, the kind of fashion domain, I think is one where kind of being with your friends, having that full sensory experience, I think is super compelling. It's also, I mean, Neil will know this, how would I say, to do full photoreal 3D rendering of that kind of product is really, really hard, right? It's kind of almost just beyond the frontier of what's possible, certainly on a mobile device, sort of simulating apparel physically. Furniture, since it tends to be more static, it has a more fixed shape, its reflectivity and its movement and all that is just easier to render. This is part of the answer to your question, Josh. I mean, what I'm seeing is that housewares brands, furniture brands are really excited about not just being able to bring their products into augmented reality to all the way to people in their homes, so that people can start like putting multiple pieces and laying out their rooms and shopping that way for sets of furniture, but also excited about allowing people to try out being in the simulation of the showroom, like I was saying earlier. It's really at the hypothesis stage right now, although we're seeing a lot of furniture brands say yes to the opportunity to create a simulation of the showroom now, because after many months and after many more months, an unknown number of additional months, like their showrooms are just not going to be as accessible to people. And so let's try out like allowing people to visit virtually and have this sort of game engine kind of experience of being in the showroom, moving around as you want. So summary of that, I think furniture, I think hard goods, these are definitely the kinds of brands and types of product categories that make the most sense at this moment for photoreal 3D rendering. I think as Obsess has shown, there are lots of other product sets that that you can present in all kinds of ways if you're not concerned about that level of photorealism, but you want to do something that's a little more, I'm not sure how to describe it. It's like richer and a little bit more, I don't know, I tend to say fantastical, but feel free to correct me, Neha. Like it has a more as a fun feel. It has a almost celebratory feel to it.
Yeah, I think in terms of categories, that's a good question. I feel like this year has been a learning for us from the categories that we were originally targeting would be the best for this experience, but it has really expanded a lot more. And ultimately, I think this is for any brand that wants to create an experience, and that could be across any different category. And that's why we're working, all the way from like telecom to, Party City, Sam's Club, like these big box retailers, in addition to luxury fashion brands. And I think, yeah, another kind of piece that Neil was talking about related to the photorealism and the fantastical versus the real. I totally agree that right now we are sort of in the beginning stages. So a lot of the experiences that are being created are more based on actual stores and actual showrooms. And we already have a lot of experiences that are starting to go beyond that, but they are still grounded in some kind of a physical space. It doesn't have to be a store or a showroom, but like we have for one of the Sam's Club experiences, we recreated a house from the National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. We have another experience we launched recently that's like a ski chalet. But I think that grounding is not bad. It's actually good because it, even for consumers, it gives them something familiar and makes it very intuitive to navigate. And then of course, yeah, over time, I think we will see that expanding to all kinds of fantastical, I think, ideas and inspirations, and especially in fashion, kind of what the inspiration that goes into every collection will really be able to be brought out in these experiences. And then lastly, about the social aspect, yeah, that's definitely something that we are working on. And that's an important part of the real life shopping experience, like going shopping with your friends, or even if it's not your friends, there are other people in the store, and actually your purchase decisions are influenced by what they might be looking at or which part of the store they're in, right? So right now we are doing this at, I would say not like at a mass level, but where we have a few players in the space, in the sense that we are often, for example, one of the use cases is for VIP customers of luxury brands. They're the selling process is very one-on-one, and so we have the sales concierge and the customer who are in that experience, or the sales concierge and a couple of customers who are together in that experience. And that has actually been really, really successful, especially over this period, because it's really given these sales teams like a tool that they can use that's much more effective versus just, you know, if they were to show them like a regular e-commerce website. Like here, as they are in those virtual appointments, they are taking them through these virtual stores and virtual showrooms, and they are able to give a much more visceral feeling to the collection. And that's actually resulted in a lot of growth for us, that particular use case. So that's kind of a smaller form of social where it's fewer people. And then I think over the next few years, you'll see that expanding to friends and more people.
Yeah, it's interesting what you're talking about, both Neha and Neil, that we, as users, we find that adoption requires a physical grounding in the virtual space. So we're talking about still needing an experience of building a showroom, or still needing the experience of building a physical structure that we then enter in the virtual space. And I wonder, this is definitely not something I want to take down the rabbit hole, but I'm wondering how long that's going to be the case. How long are we as users of these products or of these services going to require that familiarity, be ready to branch out into something more ethereal? And then just on a personal note, Neha, I'm going to need you to send me that National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation house so I can live out my dream of having a Griswold family Christmas through virtual reality.
Will do. It's so super cool. If you love the movie, you'll love the experience. It has like all kinds of
100%.
to it.
Srinivas, I wonder if we can dive a little deeper on, like, building on what Neil and Neha were just talking about something you mentioned, which is pushing tech into the background. And I think one of the reasons why Neil was talking about those types of goods, or those types of those types of industries where he's seeing adoption, is because those are the ones where it's easiest to push the tech into the background and just showcase, hey, here's this thing that you can try and that you can use. And so how do we ensure that immersive commerce is giving additional value to customers and not negatively impacting the shopping experience with a bunch of new things they have to learn or figure out?
I think so. That's a very key observation there. That's a very key observation there, Josh. So if you look at it from like any technology, like there are in different industries and different use cases have different adoption curves. So if you look at the area that we are seeing from an ad tech platform perspective, dynamic product ads in terms of shoppable video or AR-enabled native transactions, where the barrier to entry and the barrier to experience is a little bit lower, which is for the user what we're seeing is a significant amount of adoption there. In fact, I don't know if Mel can throw up a page that shows some of the AR ads that we have we have done for some of our customers. And we can put a link to this for folks that are interested in it. What you'll see here is a wide range of partners that are actually experimenting with immersive commerce experience as part of their ad units. So here you'll see that we have partnered with several retailers to really allow them to allow their customers to visualize their products within their current environment itself. And this ranges from furniture to small electronics. Things like one of the things that's popular is like seeing what the Christmas tree looks like right in time for the season. That you can actually place in your current environment and take a look at. From an adoption perspective, if you look at it across the board, yeah, this I'll let you go through that. And here you can even decorate with ornaments to see what the tree would look like. These kind of things really allow the consumer here to complete their desire, their transaction here without having to worry about whether the product fits in their space and having to worry about the overhead of return. So it essentially removes that friction in that decision making. So this is what I mean by taking technology to the background to help with that entire process. If you look at categories, beauty, furniture, footwear that we've talked about, I think beauty is a place where adoption is actually spreading. And I think those of you who monitor this space would have seen the announcement from Kohl's and Snapchat, where they've actually built a lab to make it easier for them to sell beauty. The other piece of it is you look at shoes, personal accessories, jewelry, hair accessories. What you're seeing here is a lot of technical success, but we haven't yet figured out what the business models are, and there are several that are being tested. Other things like apparel, electronics, layouts, these are areas where people are experimenting and the adoption is still very early stage. And I think Neha and Neil hit upon the value of that experience, and also some of the areas where customers have to get used to it, and the things around where they are in the adoption cycle.
That's really interesting. You talked about barriers and how, especially how the implementation of the technology could, in some instances, create barriers. And I'm curious, Neha, as someone who's actually implemented some of this stuff, like one of the barriers I assume is things like hardware. And this is something that we mentioned before. Like, how are you managing this with Obsess with things like 3D Commerce Cloud, and where do you see hardware being the weak link in the chain, if you will, as a barrier to adoption, and how do you see that changing and evolving? I have my own opinions on that, but I'd really love to hear what you think.
Yeah, so I guess a couple of things. One is, like, first of all, talking about VR headset hardware and pushing that aside really quickly to say that just doesn't have enough adoption yet for it to be something at scale. So that will happen in the future, of course, but focusing more on mobile hardware, which is where, of course, the majority of consumer traffic is. So there are obviously still a lot of limitations on how much of the real-time 3D rendering that Neil was talking about can be done on mobile at the moment, and how photorealistic it can look, and the performance implications of that. So as we know, like, consumers will leave a page if it doesn't load within like 3 seconds, right? And if you've seen a lot of kind of games, especially browser-based or immersive experiences, they often have really long load times. They are clunky, and that's all because of hardware limitations and how much GPUs can process, can render graphics, basically. So, and then the same thing goes for network, because obviously these are very heavy assets. Like, now we are going from image to video to complete 3D and 360. So these are very large files, and network is obviously a big factor there. So for us, we have focused on basically enabling to today's hardware and network specs. And then that does mean like cutting back on some of the functionality that we would ideally like to have, but it's just going to be too slow to load, or too clunky to use. So our focus has really been on making something that can really work now. And then as 5G comes along and rolls out more broadly, and each new generation of iPhones and Androids, of course, make this like more and more powerful, so we can keep enabling that. That's just our strategy. But yeah, would love to hear others' thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I think with hardware, like you were saying, right now the adoption just isn't there for true virtual reality and augmented reality. But I think as 5G continues to be available, and we have more ease of access to things like edge computing resources, I think the form factor and the adoptability of those types of hardware should improve. And I think in a almost a side point, I think that would be good not only for the shopping experience of the public at large, but I think immersive and inclusive commerce using proper AR and VR and those types of technologies, if they're built right, can probably also serve people with things like sensory or mobility or cognitive disabilities as well, along with things like social and informational shopping, and addressing those needs of the customer. So it could be that developing these new types of immersive experiences could in fact open up the customer base of some of the players and the stakeholders in this space. I know that with Verizon specifically, we try to distinguish Verizon products in that field, and I'm sure Srinivas can speak to this as well, by making and assuring that what we offer is fully inclusive. And I'll be interested to see, I'm curious if anyone else has any thoughts on that, but I'll be interested to see how these experiences grow with hardware evolution and how it potentially opens up more accessible experiences for the general public.
Yeah, and just a quick add to that, that's a really good point, actually, because, yeah, one of the main things we tell brands is this is actually increasing accessibility of your physical real estate assets, right? So if you have created a store in like one big city and you have customers all over the country, all over the world who would have to fly there, which of course they can't right now, like it's actually increasing the audience reach of these brands so much more to now enable these experiences for a broader set of audience. And then on the other side of kind of the benefits of this in general, like there are huge implications to sustainability, you know, with these experiences. Already what we're seeing with some of our customers is that they are creating, you know, completely virtual showrooms with completely virtual products that haven't been produced physically yet. And it's saving so much, you know, cutting out so much waste because they are not producing those samples physically anymore. Buyers are not traveling to fashion weeks, you know, twice a year or more than that, and going to all these showrooms in person, and they are able to do all that virtually. And as Neil said in the beginning, this was probably something that was going to happen in 3 to 5 years, and this has all kind of very quickly happened this year. So I think there are many, many broader kind of implications and benefits of this technology beyond just kind of the consumer experience that we have talked about this far.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love everything you're saying, Neha. I would add one little piece to that, which is there's a specific, actually medical furniture retailer that I've been working with recently that their standard practice has been shipping this $10,000 chair to prospective customers. And like, so the shopping experience is like, ship it to the prospective customer, they see if it works, and then often they ship it back, right? So it's not just like, you know, returning a standard Amazon, you know, delivery. It's like a big, heavy, expensive chair that they often have to return, ship. And so it's obviously really expensive and time consuming and all that, but like being able to do that browsing experience, like have an immersive showroom and then also have this AR experience is a huge advantage to them. They save huge amounts of money and time. And as you're pointing to, Neha, like shipping costs, shipping waste, packaging, all of this stuff. So yeah, I mean, I think just like the whole, I mean, obviously it's a very mixed bag, right, for cities, but the fact that people aren't going back to high-rise office spaces in New York, for example, you know, to work has all kinds of negative cascading side effects. I mean, some of the benefits, as Neha was pointing to, are distance. We're learning to live across distance, right? We're making distance matter less and less. I've been giving a talk recently, I've been calling the end of distance. A lot of what we're talking about here is really about that, right? Just like here with Zoom, we can make the fact that we are all in different places less relevant. We can actually have this conversation and sort of be physically present. We're doing that also for physical objects and physical spaces, right? Everything we're talking about here is allowing us to cross distance, to be with each other, to be with spaces, to be with things. And I think that as a lens is super interesting. One other thing that if we had hours, I'd love to talk about too, is I think immersive commerce here, just to be super overt about it, we're kind of narrowing it down, I think, for the sake of this conversation, to the visual largely, right? Or sort of putting yourself in what seems to be a physical space, right, via simulation. But I think, each of you have touched on, the possibilities of the ways commerce and transactional possibilities are showing up in all kinds of contexts, in ad context, in social media feed contexts, like we've seen Instagram over the past year. Like, you can buy things even if you didn't intend to. It's like a very impulse kind of driven thing, but like, and sensors in physical spaces, I think, are going to have a huge impact, even much more than they have in recent years going forward. So the idea that the whole world is this is what I think we mean by digital physical convergence, right? There are going to be sensors that are collecting data that is used to populate and inform machine learning models that can start to have personalized, algorithmically delivered experiences across all kinds of touch points, digital and physical. So I don't know, all of that is just a way of like shorthanding how excited I think I am, and maybe you guys are as well, for the next few years. Certainly this decade, I think, is going to see huge transformation across all these realms.
Neil, that's very interesting. Josh, I like the way you framed that question up for Neil. So let's riff on that a little bit. So let's ask the question: what's the intent here of a merchant? What's the intent of a shopper? And how does technology and this digitization enable us to deliver those intents in the most efficient manner? If you now look at that, if you ask that question, all of a sudden what you find is when you are able to take the physical into the digital and bring the digital into the physical, as Neil said, physical distance doesn't matter anymore. So think about going to a store, looking at something, maybe a piece of exercise equipment, and having a question about it and being able to reach the expert irrespective of where you are. You can't do that in a physical store. You could do it in that converged physical reality. Look at a piece of equipment and ask the question, does this fit in my flat? You're able to do that today. Previously, you had to buy that equipment or take measurements, come back, measure it, and hope it fits. Look at it from the perspective of, I have two girls, as you can see in the background here. Shopping with them is fun because I'm the dad holding all the dresses they want to try on. Just imagine if you could now try a particular, you could try a particular dress and look at the various patterns without having to physically carry through that. What does that mean in terms of the merchant, in terms of the amount of their operational efficiency? Think about what this means in terms of shelf space, inventory, talking about endless aisles, not just in the physical, but not just in the digital, but in the physical. Now think about being able to do customization, personalization of any kind of good and having it delivered. Technology is enabling all of this. When we talk about immersive commerce, to me, it's taking all of these technologies to be able to answer that question for the user, irrespective of where they are, whether they are in a space where they are reading an article about that piece of that particular product, whether it's the email that they get in the email box, whether they are in a virtual store, or whether they're in the physical store. It's all about helping that customer complete that transaction with minimal friction.
Yeah, and I think that also holds true on the buyer side as well. Neha, you mentioned the sustainability angle, and I know that is also something that startups are beginning to address. A good friend of mine, Tracy Wong, runs a company called Vor 3D that addresses exactly that, allowing people to allowing buyers and folks on the back end of fashion retailing to be able to do what both Neha, you and Srinivas, you said, to be able to get as close as possible to those types of products and be able to make purchase decisions, either wholesale or retail. So I know that that's definitely something that's happening in the marketplace. As we're coming up on our last few minutes, I want to talk a little bit about where we're going, and what some of the considerations are, especially as 5G becomes more prolific. Neha, I wanted to ask you about things like multi-sensory shopping experiences and enabling those in the virtual space. As consumers are seeking out these personalized experiences, and they're expecting that personal relationship with brands, I'm wondering how you see immersive commerce plays a part in that.
Yeah, I mean, I think pretty much as Srinivas was saying, immersive commerce is not only going to be kind of provide all the functionality that you could get in a real store, but really go beyond that into things that were not possible in the real store. In terms of like multi-sensory, I think obviously the most difficult one of that is touch and fragrance and or smell, I guess, for fragrances. And I won't really go into that because I think that those areas are still in very, very early stages of research and development. So it's probably 5 to 10 years until we will see that. But in terms of all of the other sensory experiences that you get by being in a store, like our experiences include sound and of course the visuals, and it's really, and I'll send you the Sam's Club link later, but that's one of the most immersive experiences. So I think you will see with 5G, basically we'll be able to do so much more real time, that it will become more dynamic. And I think there was a question in the chat as well about personalization, and the network speed and hardware are both actually key to that, because again, the personalization, a lot of it is about the real-time rendering, right? So as opposed to personalization on a normal e-com site where you can see the Amazon recommendations for you and it's very easy, if you're trying to personalize an entire immersive experience and render different things for different people, you definitely need to get into real-time 3D. So of course, you're starting to see that now, but over time you will see that across more categories where, as Neil was pointing out, it's for fashion, it's apparel, it's much more difficult to do those simulations right now. And it really will become, these experiences will become a point, as Srinivas was mentioning, about being able to get those questions answered anytime that you want, really integrating the sales associate. And, you know, in a real store, sometimes you feel intimidated by these sales associates who keep, who are like either hovering around or they're annoying and asking you what you want. Whereas in a virtual store, you can go to them only when you want. And actually that's one of the, that's one of the reasons for luxury brands that they're also trying this experience, right? So that aspect will be brought in. I think someone brought up live shopping on the chat, and that's also really interesting. So really it becomes, for us, the way we see it, it becomes a hub for all these services and all these actions that are needed by the consumer to be taken on their path to purchase. And it becomes a much more seamless and intuitive experience versus right now we are in a very kind of artificial construct of shopping online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm curious about the trade-off when it comes to that. I know that one of the benefits, of course, from this comes from Justin and the audience. One of the benefits from this type, what you just described of this personalization, means adapting the experience to each individual user based on preferences. But I'm wondering, Srinivas, I know you indicated that you had an opinion on this about the benefits of this versus the threat or the concern of loss of privacy.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we've got to, whatever we do here will have to be will have to be with a privacy first position. So one of the things that you'll see is brands that are going to get traction here are ones that are built on trust and innovation. Those are the two key things that are required. From a consumer's perspective, the consumer will share the data with the merchant as long as they understand how the data is being used. It's being used to add value to their experience. I think that's going to be the key thing. So we could imagine a world wherein you have, where I could have my personal vault with all of my personal information that I carry with me, that I securely exchange to personalize my experience just for that particular transaction. I mean, we're not talking about that here today. That will require us to have the edge compute and the and 5G deployed, and that it'll really come to life at that point in time, where you could actually, for that particular experience, exchange the data, have that personalization, do the transaction very securely, and essentially take that data back with you. Now, the advantage you get with that is, yes, there's a cost, but the value to the user and the value to the merchant is so large that those savings can be then used to subsidize the cost of delivering that experience. We're going to get there. It's going to take a little more. There's going to be some technological advancements that need to occur. There's going to be some penetration of existing technologies that need to occur, and we'll absolutely get there. But the key thing I want to underscore here is this has to be viewed, and adoption will only occur when there is value to all the stakeholders that are engaged here. Otherwise, it becomes a gimmick. And what we got to be careful about is, while we do these experiments, we got to keep an eye on that value to the consumer, because it's all about them.
Yeah, no, I love what you're saying, Srinivas. And you know, in the consulting that we do at Running Futures, I mean, it's if we take a step back here, I mean, this conversation, I think rightly, as an immersive commerce conversation, has focused on shopping as an explicit experience that takes place in a physical space that we've known as store, right? And so, but of course, you know, as Neil was pointing out, we've had 20, 25 years, right, of shopping in other ways. And so one of the Q&A questions was asking about certainly VR, but also voice assistants, you know, and other kinds of ways that software can automatically, increasingly, in a personalized way, fulfill on things we want. But building on what you're saying, Srinivas, as we start to solve that sense of trust, which does exist, right, between many customers and many brands and platforms, but shopping, or put more basically, sort of the fulfillment or the connection of people with things they want and need, right? Like not every connection of people with things they want and need needs to be something we'd understand as shopping, right? I mean, increasingly these things can happen automatically. They can just be fulfilled based on algorithmic knowledge and personalization, right? And so shopping, I think, is something that can become more intentional, more experiential, more entertaining. Whereas things that, you know, like you're not going to create an obsessed store for paper towels, right? Or, you know, basic things that you need for your kitchen. I mean, not that you couldn't, but it seems like not as interesting, right? So the point is that when we consult anyway with clients, you know, we try to look at what are the moments throughout your customers or prospective customers' days. And, you know, sometimes they don't have visual bandwidth because they're driving or they're doing something else they need to visually focus on. So you can't present them something visual, but could you engage with them via voice or some other way, right? So I think increasingly this decade, we're going to see these sort of ecosystems of touch points that have different ways of engaging with people in different contexts in their lives. And I think that's another interesting lens to apply to this conversation.
That's a great lens, Neil, because as we look at the spectrum of things that we buy, from the essentials all the way to the experiential, where it is almost entertainment, the kind of needs and the technologies that will support it are going to be different across that spectrum. Fair point.
Mm-hmm. And I know that as we're coming here to the end, and just to build Srinivas, I know that Verizon Media and Verizon at large is taking that very seriously. Even just this past week, we launched Connect ID, which is a way for brands to eliminate the need for things like third-party cookies and empower consumers to share their pieces of their identity or the personal information with the brands that they trust. And to pursue that personal relationship that way. Neha, closing it out, I want to actually go to something that we got from the audience, and this was something around things like analytics of immersive experiences, things like heat maps on where someone lingers or looks or things like that. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that as a function of being able to continue to personalize that experience using the real-time analytics and data that is processed at the edge and carried over 5G, something where we're able to take in not as a way to view these analytics after the shopping experience, but actually put them to work in the middle of the experience, something that really only is possible with 5G and edge computing. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on that, and do you see that evolution coming?
That sounds super cool. I think that would be amazing if we can actually do real-time analytics processing and customize to the experience to that. And I can think of so many like immediate use cases. For example, like sometimes in our stores, like people get lost, like they don't know where to go because again, you're seeing it on your device, and especially when we are recreating a real store. And if we could in real time know that, okay, this person is, we know that we obviously collect all that data and we can look at it afterwards, and we can look at it in our analytics dashboard in real time, but it's not that we are changing the interface, based on that. So I think that will just make these much more effective. And then of course, for the retailers, this data is, it's so valuable. And even just from all the data we have right now, because we have launched like more than 60 virtual stores, it's really interesting, like the patterns and the insights, and being able to use that data or segments of that data to customize the experience by category, by customer, and by device. Like if we know that certain devices are older, like we were talking about with older GPUs, serving them different things based on their network speed. Like there's so many possibilities of how this could evolve. And then eventually the goal being that the experience really becomes something that's very tailored to you, and tailored to your preferences, both in terms of how you navigate, how the space is, and the actual products.
Yeah,
Josh,
Neil, do you? Yeah, please.
I know that what you asked, that's pretty interesting, because now if you leapfrog here a couple of years and think about the edge compute that's going to be available, and think about the fast last mile connectivity, and it could be 5G, or even with Wi-Fi 6. The things that we can do right now with AI and ML starts getting very interesting. And we're already customers that we have announced that we're doing this with people like Cooler Screens, where you can now build learning models and push those inference models to the edges and really start doing those real-time analytics, and actually communicating those insights as something that's actionable, either to folks on the floor there or directly to the customers. So these things are, the interesting is some of these things are not futuristic. Some of these things we are already doing them, probably not as much in the not yet as much on the retail space, but I think that's fast coming, both in the virtual environment and in the physical environment. I would actually say that it's much easier in the virtual environment because all of your data is readily available. So it's just a question of having that available to the game engine. If you go back to the example that Neil was using, where that was an experience that's probably running inside a Unity engine, those are things that we could actually do today.
Yeah, Neil, do you see that? Are you starting to see the clamoring for that kind of instant customization in the market?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, like I was saying, I think the way we lead conversations when we're talking with clients or even prospective clients about what's possible is in the coming 3 to 5 years. I think, as Nia was pointing to, and I think as Srinivas, you were talking about with edge compute and 5G. I mean, I think if we start thinking now through the lens of, let's look at all the different moments throughout our prospective users or customers' day, and sort of what do they really need, want, what are the opportunities to interact, when should we leave them alone? When should we anticipate that they want to interact in some way or want to fulfill, a desire to buy something or see some content or whatever. But I think we're really going to see personalized digital ecosystems around brands and businesses, start to flourish the next few years. I think it's a real frontier. And honestly, I think, 10 years from now, the way software integrates with our lives is going to be dramatically different than it is today, right? I mean, I think we've all grown up using technology where we still, almost everything we have it do for us, we have to tell it exactly what to do, and I think it's going to less and less be the case going forward. So that's a long guess, right, Josh?
Yeah, no, I think we're on the cusp of some really great innovations in this space. Thank you, Neha, Srinivas, and Neil, for this amazing discussion, and a special thank you to everyone in the audience for joining in. This conversation has been recorded and will be available, I think, tomorrow if anyone wants to share this content with their communities, and we do encourage that. We'll be back here tomorrow at 2 p.m. for our monthly Mind the Gap event, where we highlight the voices of entrepreneurs and technologists who are championing inclusivity, representation, and progress for all women in technology. This month, we have the pleasure of sitting down with the CEO and founder of Popcorn, an amazing entrepreneur named Dawn Dixon, as well as Kat Schmitz, a product designer and professor of design at NYU named Kat Schmitz. And we're super excited for that conversation and to hear about the work that they're doing in the design space, especially as when it comes to retail. Again, if you'd like more information on the topics that we've talked about here today, or if you want to learn more about 5G and what it means for your business, go ahead and visit us at verizon5glabs.com and get in touch. You can also see our full roster of events from now all the way through until I think the end of January. So thank you so much for joining us, and everyone have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks all.